Right, so in the initial HR 15, we had dealing with TPS, right? Because TPS has becomes this drama that is being lived in countries, and we would take care of that TPS. I would consider TPS, but I'm a big believer that I think what the administration did in country in a lot of these places was very good first step. I'm also a believer that you can keep, the government should help pay for counsel in these cases, but through existing means and existing organizations that are doing, just provide grants the way they've done in some of these cases.
But would you make counsel?
Yeah, no, I think they should have. Yeah, no, I think they should have the right to counsel. I think most of the people take counsel of some sort. We just have to help fund it a little bit more. But I'm all right with that. And then I also think you have to. So I went to the border when this was happening. It's happening now again. But I was there on the border. I was embarrassed with the treatment that these children were receiving. My opponent called for deportation. If you have on tape saying that all these kids should be sent home. Look, we have refugee programs. I visited El Salvador, and I went into, forget about towns or villages, neighborhoods, where by street they were controlled by gangs. You saw the tag at the entrance. You saw the little kid who watched you come in, who made you pay a fee to go into it. And what happens to these kids, right? What the fact that these girls get sold into slavery in essence at 12 and 13 years of age, that boys at 14 or 15 are carrying guns, and the idea that somehow we in America can build a wall high enough, thick enough to not be compassionate to what's going on, which in many cases is an offshoot of failed American policy, is absurd. These are places which could be tremendous producers to the U.S. economy, tremendous markets to produce and consume our goods. If you look at Mexico right now, Mexico's immigration is neutral into the United States, it's net neutral right now. That's not because we built the wall better or there's more ICE guards on the border. It's because the Mexican economy is actually working. And because it may not be the economy I want, but Mexicans find that there's an opportunity in their country, and many of them stay. And these countries, just so you understand, the budget of Miami-Dade County is bigger than most of the countries south of Mexico, in Central America. And so we need to look at how we have, Bob Graham was very big on this Central American, Caribbean Basin initiative. We've got to look at programs like this, which create opportunity in these countries, which create a way forward. Because where you operated, right, Homestead, once you understand, that is the most productive land per square acre in all the state of Florida. It's not the richest land in Florida, by far. It's relatively poor soil. But the human caliber that's there, the opportunity that our system creates richness there that we live off, right? It's the second biggest industry in Miami-Dade County. And if we could do it on bad soil, imagine when you could do it in the rich soils of Central America. But we have to have a much better policy that coordinates, and it's a holistic solution as opposed to,
Holistic in terms of our policy, our economic policy. Holistic.
How we treat these children are a symptom of a broader policy. We have to have a serious relationship with these countries to the south. We have a serious relationship with Canada. Notice they want to build a wall to the south, not to the north. That is a very porous. If we built a wall in the north, that's a very porous wall. The reality is that we are now, the immigration in Mexico is controlled because of relationships we've established with Mexico that has made Mexico a richer country. By the way, the leading buyer of U.S. goods in the world, they're our biggest trading partner in terms of buying our stuff. And we have to look at the rest of Latin America, or South America, particularly the Central America, as a place where we have to have a more serious relationship. But that said, we have to treat these children with respect. We have to give them counsel, because they are, by and large, victims of persecution. And they are, in many cases, in fear for their lives, and that's why they came. And I stood there and watched them, and Now, are there cases that they clearly don't qualify for refugee? Yeah, and we'll find solutions, but in many cases, I don't think that children who have no family in the United States, this is the best place for them to grow up in foster care in the United States. I think they should be with their families, and by the way, it's much more efficient, effective, and long-term productive for the United States that we create a way for them to go home, as long as we can protect them.
Are you able to stay with us a little longer?
I think by the rain I hear outside, I may be here all night.
There's a question over here.
Yes.
Okay, currently immigration is largely seen as a Latinx issue. However, the criminalization of people of color, specifically the Black community, is a factor outside of immigration, but nevertheless affects their trajectory. Black people are deported at 3 to 5 times the rate of their present prison system. Programs like DACA affect groups differently considering the school-to-prison pipeline. What is your stance to apply a more holistic approach?
Well, I think I just made an argument for that, but I'm a big believer in the diversity visa program. And by the way, to get our bill through the House, we had to negotiate with the Black Caucus because they said, well, you know, we need to be treated fairly in immigration because, of course, people of African American descent don't get the same chances under the system, right? Because other groups were in the line first, therefore their pull is stronger. Therefore, they not only get the immigrant visas, but then they participate in the lottery at much higher levels, and therefore people from African countries don't get a crack at it. I'm a big believer that we should keep a diversity component as a strong part of it. I'll tell you the other side of this. I'm also a big believer in the EB-5 portion of immigration. I believe the EB-5 program should be stronger. I believe it should be more regulated. That doesn't mean by government, but there should be rules that are clear so there's less fraud to the immigrant participants. I'm a big believer in allowing people who've studied in the United States to get a pathway to status much quicker than they do today, because I think we're creating damage for our country. You know, the United States, of the 200 best educational institutions on earth, 189 of them are in the United States. We have 150,000 Chinese studying here, over 70,000 Indians, 60,000 Koreans. And so, when they finish studying at MIT, we make them go home. And it's not like we teach them most of physics. We teach them with the best professors in the world. And we should, if our companies and our economics have a desire for them, we should be able to keep them and integrate them into the American economy at a much better pace than what we do today. So I hope you understood. I'm for the diversity program and keeping it in place and expanding on it, but everybody should be treated fairly and the same. But within an immigration system, we have to have different pathways forward, right? From the lottery system that we have today to the family reunification, which makes no sense. So I'll give you an example. I think it's maybe the Philippines. If you have a claimant brother from the Philippines, the wait time, I think, is 18 years. That's not rational, right? If I claim my brothers because I want them to be here, but if it's an 18-year waiting period, by the time my brother gets here, first of all, the chances of one of us not making it, by the time he gets here, the whole purpose of that immigration program is lost. And so we have to have a rational relationship with countries. It may mean that we may not have that program. It may mean that we have a more generous visiting program, because a lot of these countries that have very, very bad tourist visa requirements. And so we've got to figure out better ways to do that.
Question over here.
Oh yeah. Thank you by the way for coming.
No, it's my pleasure.
Throughout your time in Congress, what immigration reforms did you personally introduce in the past, and were they bipartisan?
So we introduced what was called HR 15, which was the comprehensive immigration bill. We had, I think it was 200 co-sponsors, and we had Republicans among them. I think it was the only bipartisan piece of legislation. We could not get it passed out of Congress. In fact, no immigration bill passed out of Congress. I sat on the Judiciary Committee, so I co-sponsored a bunch of immigration fix legislations that were put forward, but none of it got through. You know, I think it was the primaries that got least done. And it had to do mostly with the fact that the Republicans were not gonna move any piece of legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Was there anything we could have, should have done for Boehner to have at least taken a vote on any of the bills? And when we saw the Democrats do a sit-in on a mediocre gun law, we wondered why didn't that happen for immigration reform?
I don't think, look, I think that we were victims, all of us, right? I mean, if you saw I don't know if you saw the documentary that ran, I think it was on Frontline recently, Gutierrez was in it, and it talked about the comprehensive immigration reform and the movement, what was going on beyond. I was there, day to day, and I think the Republicans were not going to pass comprehensive immigration reform because it was simply not in their interest in electoral politics. It's that simple. And I don't think if we would have pressured Boehner or surrendered something to Boehner, we would have gotten something. And I am very, very worried about fixes that fix easy stuff, because then you never get to the hard stuff, right? If you offer people, you know, the appetizers, the dinner, or kids, the appetizers, the dinner, and dessert. Dessert always goes first with kids, right? And the reality is that's the mindset that was there. It was about instant gratification.
Incremental versus fair, is that what you
No, I don't mean I mean, instead of, because incremental, I think some of us would have gone, but for example, let's say there were two options here. One was, let them do the work visas, let them do the investment visas, the education visas. You get rid of all of those, but then the problem is now we have a group of people who have almost no power in the system. Then we go to the other way, which is some Republicans offered this illusion. Give everyone status, or everyone within some parameter, status in a law, but then don't give them a pathway forward. And what we would have, first of all, I thought it was an illusion. The Republicans would have never agreed to it. And I think what we would have done is enshrined the second-class citizenship, right? We would have, in law, created this sort of status of purgatory, if it were, that you create this status where people can't move out of. And I think that would have been, then we might have gotten rid of the pressure, but we never would have gotten the legislation. And what would have happened is that then the backlog would have gotten, I think, worse.
So in essence, it wasn't a strategic problem, it was a problem that in that moment didn't have a...
In my heart of hearts, right, we all think that if the president would have done this, or Boehner would have done that, I honestly believe that there were members that were working towards a solution, but I think within the electoral politics that the Republicans are looking at, this works, and Donald Trump is the embodiment.
And why will it be different if we have a President Clinton and a divided Congress?
Because the problem is that each day that goes by, the capacity of that position to sustain itself diminishes, right? It's sort of, they may be the world's greatest buggy whip makers, there's just no need for buggy whips anymore. And so while those positions may hold, and they may develop almost this isolationist or this punishing philosophy around immigration, the problem is that each one of these guys, when you look at it's Iowa, right? When you think of Iowa, right, what do you think of? Farmers, right? You think of, I guarantee you there are more Hispanics in Iowa than there are farmers, actual farmers, right? And there's status being created in Arizona, which has passed the most draconian immigration laws in the country. Out of every 9 school children, I think it's 6 or 7 are Hispanic. And we've lived that here, right? So when I was a kid growing up, in Miami there were bumper stickers that said, "With the last American leaving Miami, please bring the flag."
Pero
Yeah.
Joe, we have Medic fundraising for Trump. We have Helen Aguirre, spokesperson for Trump. Just because they're Latino doesn't mean that they're...
I didn't say that they're, no, and I listen, I get that. And they're always gonna, you know, we've gotta allow people to have freedom of speech, and then people are gonna be able to decide with their money and with their attitudes what they do. But I think by and large, when you look at the number, the last poll, Trump is at 13%. Let me just for mindset, to be able to win Florida, it used to be that if you were a Republican, a Republican, you needed to get over 40% of the Hispanic vote. Today, it's much higher because the number increased. So the reality is that it starts putting places out of reach. And if you look at that, so you look at when we passed anti-bilingual ordinances in Dade County, which, believe it or not, they were passed, right? Anti-bilingual ordinances. And then a court decided that we're gonna have districts that were representative of the people that lived in districts. The Cubans did not become a majority, they didn't even come close to a majority, but they took 3 or 4 of the slots right away. Guess what the first piece of legislation that was put forward that was gotten rid of? Because others saw those communities coming into them and they didn't want to be on the wrong side of history and they moved. And you may see Arizona, which is suddenly in play. Hillary will play Arizona. And I think most of them, people like Ryan, people like Boehner, they get this. And I think they need to be rolled. And I think maybe, to be quite honest, I think you need people who have operated within government as long as people like Hillary Clinton, and I think you may see. We're not going to see a perfect thing, and we have to be ready for this, right? We're not going to get a perfect piece of legislation. It's not going to do everything we want, but what we can't do is go for a mirage, which is everyone gets legalized but then made to be slaves to a system that doesn't work. What we need to do is get the big problem taken care of, and then we can deal with these parts, and I think they'll be.
In terms of since with all the open relations with Cuba, I was wondering what your stance was on the Cuban Adjustment Act and what you would think of doing, let's say for now, political asylum, people that are coming from Cuba, that are coming through Central America, etc. What is your stance on that?
Look, I think again, my opponent on the Republican side said he was against. He said he was going to file a bill to get rid of the Cuban Adjustment Act. By the way, he helped spawn the disaster in Central America, right? And then when he did that and he realized that it was unpopular, then he announced that he was going to remove assistance from people who come under this program so that they had to qualify for asylum. Problem is, an asylum claim takes, what is it now, about a year?
Depends, yeah.
Depends.
For Venezuela, it's 3
Right.
years, 4 years.
So let me give you that example. So I'm going to use Cubella.
Assuming you're doing a permanent asylum.
Correct,
thing,
correct.
That could take you 3 years to get.
Okay, so then he said, well, you gotta apply for asylum and then you get aid if you qualify. So what that would do is strip all these folks of assistance, right? And I get it, they're here, they're coming, they should take care of themselves. The problem is, people get hit by cars, people get sick, people are left in a difficult situation, and they would still be there. And then what would happen is it would come out of local budgets as opposed to a federal budget that's designated for them and for the Haitians. And so I'm not a believer that that's how you should handle this. I think you need to look at the whole problem, and you need to have an immigration policy that makes sense, and that has to do with the numbers allocated to Cuba. It has to do with how we treat prisoner detainees and people that are under deportation orders. And yeah, we have to look at the Cuban Adjustment Act and how we do it. But what we can't do it is ask backwards, right? To sort of say, I'm not talking to you, but I'm going to make it more difficult for you because I won't talk to you, right? And so then what happens is you're just making a victim of the person who's in fear of persecution. And if there's anything that Cuban Americans should understand is that fear of persecution, that seeking asylum.